Chapter 1041. Xu Shaoan sighed. I didn't want to dent your confidence, but I think it's best for you to see the reality. I've watched Boss's recent battle footage during the finals, and you should take a look later as well. He's different now. Different how? Yue Zhengyu asked in a curious manner. Xu Shaoan replied, he's so badass now that I find myself wondering if he's even still the same guy anymore. Do you think we're the only ones who have been making breakthroughs? If you ask me, Boss had definitely also made breakthroughs of his own, and they're all extremely significant breakthroughs. Instead of being disheartened as Xu Shaoan imagined that he would be, a smile appeared on his face. This is how it should be. This is why he's our captain, and he's always been able to create miracles. In the future, he's going to lead us to create the biggest miracle there ever was. So how could he not be improving? I'm really looking forward to facing him again someday. No matter what happens, as the final seeds left behind by the academy, we have to do everything in our power to improve ourselves. Almost all of the Seoul televisions had begun to broadcast matches from the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition, and countless people were sitting in front of their screens, awaiting the commencement of the upcoming match. There was no age limit, and the only limits in place were that one had to be below the titled Douluo level, and also below the three-word battle armor master stage. It was said that as the Star Battle.net continued to improve, even the most powerful soul masters on the entire continent would be able to participate in future editions of the competition. It had to be said that this competition had been a resounding success and had made the entire federation aware of the Star Battle.net. The final 16 only had numbers assigned to them, and each of them had their own odds. All members of the general public would make bets for who the final champion was going to be, and the odds differed based on the performances of the participants in the prior stages of the competition. This undoubtedly made the event even more popular, and just this betting segment alone was enough to earn the federation an enormous amount of money. Number 33 had 1 to 4 odds, which were the third highest odds. His forte was his strength. His martial soul appeared to be some type of true dragon. His cultivation rank was currently unknown, and he possessed the ability to disguise his own soul rings. His projected soul power rank was around 70. During his past battles, he was always able to defeat his opponents in a very short time through explosive displays of power, and he'd been given the nickname of Golden Dragon King. He was one of the top favorites of the competition, and the only potential flaw that he had was that he potentially wouldn't be able to do well in prolonged battles. It was generally the case that soul masters with great explosive power would suffer during prolonged battles, so if he were to encounter an opponent who could drag out the battle, then it was very likely that he would lose the battle. The overall evaluation was that his chances of securing the championship title exceeded 20%. He was extremely powerful, and it was very likely that he still had more tricks that he'd been hiding up his sleeve. His battles were always able to make the spectators' blood churn in their veins, and his battle style was the perfect combination of brute strength and artistry, earning him a lot of fans and admirers. Perhaps he wasn't the most powerful participant among the final 16, but he was definitely the flashiest. The Star Battle.net rated him as the participant who was most likely to make a young woman fall for him. Tang Wolin was rendered completely speechless upon seeing this rating. What kind of rating was this? Was it making him out to be some kind of womanizer? He stripped off his clothes, then entered his star cabin and went through all of the preparatory procedures. The star cabin closed, and he logged onto the Battle.net. Light flashed, and he found himself in the world of the Star Battle.net once again. He was surprised to discover that in contrast with everyone else around him, he had a layer of golden light around his body, and that instantly drew widespread attention. Was this one of the benefits given to those who made it to the final elimination stage? With that in mind, a faint smile appeared on his face. The Star Battle.net was becoming more and more interesting. The entire system was still quite rough around the edges, and it didn't even have any functions, but at the very least, a platform had been established through this competition, and the system had an immeasurable future ahead of it. Golden Dragon King. Someone suddenly exclaimed, and a young woman rushed over to Tang Wolin before appraising him in a curious manner. However, Tang Wolin's face was completely blurred, and that was a measure that had been taken to protect the privacy of all of the participants. After arriving around 3 meters away from Tang Wolin, the young woman was naturally kept out by a layer of golden light, making her unable to advance any further. Tang Wolin didn't say anything as he continued to stride toward the competition venue. More cries of surprise began to ring out around him, but no one was able to get closer than 3 meters away from him, and as he quickly strode onward, the crowd naturally dispersed. The finals were about to begin, and one had to win 4 more matches if they wanted to become the final champion. It was undoubtedly the case that all 4 of those matches were going to be extremely arduous, and the opponents that he was going to face were only going to become more and more powerful. He had just examined Yuanen Yehui and New Zealand's odds. Their odds were second to last and third to last, respectively. At the same time, he reviewed some of the competition footage of the other participants, and that further alerted him to the fact that the rest of the competition was going to be difficult for him. His odds were able to make it into the top 3 more so because he was always able to finish his matches very quickly. As such, he appeared to be more mysterious, and no one could identify what his soul power rank was, so there was a lot of mystery and intrigue around him. Just from the power that he displayed alone, his odds wouldn't have been so high. All of his opponents were extremely powerful, and that only worked to further stoke the flames of battle intent in his heart. It was a pity that there were no 2-on-2 or team battles during this first edition of the competition. Otherwise, he really wanted to fight alongside his friends. Even now, he was still struck by a sense of exhilaration whenever he thought back to the competition they'd taken part in the Douluo Empire. It could be said that his powers had only truly begun to improve at a rapid rate after his battle with Long Yue. Both his confidence and latent potential had completely been brought to the fore through that battle. Esteemed number 33, please come with me. After arriving at the competition venue, he wasn't teleported into it as usual. Instead, a very beautiful employee came out before making an inviting hand gesture toward Tang Wolin. According to his understanding of the Star Battle.net, all of the people in here were real people who had entered the system through Star cabins. It seemed that he was receiving different treatment now that he'd made it to the true finals. Tang Wolin was taken to a luxurious and comfortable room that seemed to have been reserved only for him. This is your designated resting suite. Prior to the commencement of your match, I'll be guiding you to the competition venue. If you have any requirements, you can call for me at any time. The female server wore a very charismatic smile, and she was appraising Tang Wolin with a lot of curiosity in her eyes. She couldn't see his face, but from the skin on his body, she could tell that he was quite a young man. Even so, he had managed to forge such a scintillating reputation for himself in such a prestigious competition, so how could she not be curious about him? Tang Wolin nodded and extended some words of gratitude. The female server silently departed, leaving him to himself in this comfortable room. There were some intricate little snacks in the room, as well as some fruits and drinks. There was also a bed and a futon that was specifically to be used for meditation, so there was everything that he could need here. Tang Wolin strode over to the futon before sitting down, resting his hands on his knees and closing his eyes to rest. This was the first round of the finals, where 16 would be reduced to 8. Every round was an elimination round, so each person would only have one opportunity. As for the matchups, those were only going to be announced at the commencement of the matches, so no one knew who their opponent was. Tang Wolin didn't mind who he came up against as long as it wasn't one of his friends. At the same time, he was very confident in New Zealand and Yuanen. Their odds weren't direct representations of their powers, and after going through so much, they definitely couldn't be compared to the average soul master. In particular, following their training on the demonic island, they definitely possessed far greater mental fortitude than the average person. A layer of faint light appeared over Tang Wolin's face, and the light spread before turning into a faint golden color, making his skin appear slightly translucent. Even though he wasn't meditating, Tang Wolin was still sensing the world around him, and he discovered that there were only some faint spatial fluctuations in the Battle.net, as opposed to any elements. Hence, even though the Star Battle.net was already a very convincing simulation of the real world, it was still just a simulation. After all, it was unable to contain battles between 3-word battle armor masters and above, but not because the system wouldn't be able to handle the clashes of energy. Instead, the main concern was that 3-word battle armor masters possessed too much spiritual power, and that could potentially throw the entire system into disarray, which was a very dangerous potential hazard. Despite its shortcomings, the Star Battle.net really was a fantastic invention. If it could become more prevalent, it would definitely improve the overall combat prowess of the entire federation, and it would be especially helpful to the military. Chapter 1042. This competition had encompassed the entire Federation, but in reality, Tang Wuling had already discovered that the vast majority of the participants were soldiers. This was very understandable. Star cabins took up a lot of space, and they were far from affordable, so it became very difficult for normal people to participate in this competition. The Federation would definitely work to address this issue in the future, and if it could be resolved, the Star BattleNet would undoubtedly be able to develop at a rapid rate. Technological advancements required prolonged periods of work, but popularity could be accrued in a very short time. In the not-so-distant future, the Douluo Federation would most likely truly become a superpower that was far superior to the Douluo Empire and the Dou Spirit Empire. Not long after that, the sound of gentle door knocking rang out, and the female server entered the room again. Esteemed number 33, your match is about to begin. In order to ensure fairness, all of the eliminations matches in this round will be commencing at the same time. Your opponent will be number 142. 142? Tang Wuling immediately recalled who his opponent was, and at the same time, he heaved an internal sigh of relief after ascertaining that it wasn't Yuanen Yehui England. Thus, he rose to his feet and said, "Let's go. Right this way, please." The female server made an inviting hand gesture before leading the way. There was no teleportation on this occasion. He followed the female server through a long corridor and arrived directly at the competition venue. Prior to even entering the venue, he could already hear waves of raucous cheers. Esteemed number 33, in order to simulate the most realistic battle scenario, the audience's voices won't be muted today, so please keep that in mind. The female server stopped at the entrance to the competition venue. It had to be said that as he listened to the loud cheers around him, he was taken back to the Douluo Empire. The deafening cheers were quite astonishing, but they didn't affect him much at all. The training he'd undergone on the demonic island had greatly strengthened his mental fortitude, so he certainly wasn't going to be swayed by some cheering. Back in the Douluo Empire, the entire audience had supported Long Yue, yet they were still the ones who had secured victory in the end. He strode into the competition venue, and his opponent was also present on the platform across from him. The information surrounding this number 142 surfaced in his mind. This was a 7-ring soul sage with a very rare and special martial soul. He was quite powerful, and also possessed a wealth of battle experience. All of a sudden, Tang Wuling recalled that this was the one who had defeated Yue Zhengyu in the round-robin stage to progress as second in their group. This meant that if he could defeat his opponent, he would be avenging Yue Zhengyu. As the one who had emerged in the first position from his group, the first round of the elimination stage was weighed in his favor as he was guaranteed to face the second participant of another group. Even so, Tang Wuling wasn't going to allow any complacency to set in. The fact that number 142 had defeated Yue Zhengyu indicated that he would be quite a powerful opponent, and it could be said that Yue Zhengyu had been unlucky to have lost that battle, but that wasn't something that Tang Wuling was going to consider. Number 142 was also appraising Tang Wuling. It was undoubtedly the case that he was quite unlucky to have been paired up against this Golden Dragon King, who had the third highest odds among the final 16. However, that certainly didn't mean that he was just going to roll over and surrender. A beam of light descended from the sky, and it was revealed to be an old man. Could it be that there were referees for the finals? This was something that hadn't been announced. The old man said in a serious voice, in order to ensure the fairness and impartiality of the matches in the finals, I will be acting as the match referee to complement the decision made by the system. Both of you, get ready. You may begin when I say so. There are no rules. All you have to do is defeat your opponent. The old man didn't make any self-introduction, but both Tang Wuling and number 142 could sense an extremely terrifying pressure from him, so it was undoubtedly the case that his cultivation rank far exceeded theirs. Get ready. The old man raised his right hand high up into the air. Tang Wuling's eyes narrowed slightly as he appraised his opponent. Number 142 possessed the phantom martial soul, and his soul skills remained a mystery at this point, but he possessed extremely powerful defensive prowess against physical and energy attacks. On the flip side, he had a weakness against light and holy attribute energy attacks. It could be said that he had been quite lucky when he defeated Yue Zhengyu despite the attribute advantage that Yue Zhengyu had over him, but even so, it was still a testament to his powers. At this moment, the commentator's voice also rang out beside the ears of all of the spectators. This is a matchup between number 33, Golden Dragon King, and number 142, Phantom King. From the odds, Golden Dragon King should have an absolute advantage as Phantom King's odds aren't even half of his. However, what we all need to pay attention to is that the Golden Dragon King possesses immense strength, and that has often been the key behind the quick victories he secured in previous rounds. In contrast, the type of opponent that Phantom King fears the least are strength type soul masters. He is virtually completely immune to physical attacks, so in that respect, Golden Dragon King is at a disadvantage. I don't know whether Phantom King can create a miraculous upset here, but I believe that he has very good chances. For all of you currently spectating this match, do you support the underdog, Phantom King, or the flashy and badass Golden Dragon King? You can cast your votes over multiple platforms to express your support of one of these two, and each vote only costs 1 federal credit to cast. In the air above the competition platform, 2 pillars of light appeared at once. Below the yellow pillar of light was the number 33, and below the blue pillar of light was the number 142. Both pillars of light began to rise up in unison. The commentator's voice was audible to both Tang Wuling and number 142. In the final stages of the competition, they were going to experience all possible disruptions that could appear. Both of them looked up at the pillars of light at the same time, and Tang Wuling was left feeling quite speechless. The Federation was way too much of a money-grabbing machine. Each vote only cost 1 federal credit to cast, but there were no rules stating that each person could only cast 1 vote. If a wealthy tycoon were presented with this decision, who knew how many votes they were going to cast? Besides, the Federation had an enormous population, and a very large proportion of them were spectating this competition, so they were undoubtedly going to earn an astronomical sum of money just from this stunt alone. The 2 pillars of light quickly rose up, and in the beginning, they were evenly matched. However, Tang Wuling's yellow pillar of light quickly began to take the lead, surpassing the blue pillar of light in a flash, and it wasn't long before the yellow pillar of light was more than twice as tall as the blue one. It was undoubtedly the case that there were far more people supporting the badass Golden Dragon King than those supporting the understated Phantom King. The referee glanced at the 2 participants before yelling, "Begin." Tang Wuling didn't spring into action right away. Instead, he cast his gaze toward his opponent. This Phantom King's entire body had a transparent quality to it, making it appear as if he were an illusion. At the same time, specks of light began to appear all over his body, and he was quickly encapsulated in a suit of light blue battle armor. The suit of battle armor was also quite translucent, just as his body was. The wings on the back of the suit of battle armor were not very large, and they were currently in a folded state. His entire being gave one an illusionary feeling. Tang Wuling had naturally heard what the commentator had just said, and thus, he was made aware of the fact that this Phantom King was virtually immune to physical attacks. Didn't this make him a little similar in nature to the possession demon he'd faced not long ago? No matter how powerful this Phantom King was, there was no way that he'd be able to compare with the possession demon. A phantom was an apparition of darkness, and even though he didn't possess any light attribute powers, his bloodline aura was of an extreme yang attribute, and it was still something that no phantom would be able to oppose. As for just how powerful this number 142 was, that was something that he'd only be able to ascertain through battle. Chapter 1043. The Phantom King was a very cautious person, and he'd studied Tang Wuling's battle footage in great detail. As such, he was quite wary of Tang Wuling's explosive power. His immunity to physical attacks wasn't complete immunity, and on top of that, he was still quite susceptible to the shockwaves from physical attacks. His main advantage was that he possessed far greater spiritual power compared to other soul masters of the same caliber, and that made him very adept at predicting his opponent's movements. After learning that his first round opponent was going to be Tang Wuling, he had immediately devised a strategy for himself. He was going to employ guerrilla warfare tactics to wear down Tang Wuling as much as possible. Tang Wuling's battle style was extremely explosive and brutal, and there was no way that he'd be able to sustain such an extraordinary level of offensive output. As long as he could weather the initial storm, he'd have a chance to retaliate. He was a very patient and composed fighter. Yue Zhengyu had lost to him even after gaining an absolute advantage, and it was just as Yue Zhengyu had deduced. That was certainly not just due to dumb luck. Tang Wuling gently tapped his foot on the ground, and golden light shimmered from his body. The first thing to appear was the golden visor of his dragon moon battle armor. Immediately thereafter, specks of golden light appeared all over his body, and he also released his suit of 2-word battle armor. His opponent had donned their suit of battle armor right away, and he certainly wasn't going to act cocky and refrain from doing the same. No matter what he thought of his opponent, he was still a soul master with a suit of 2-word battle armor. His left foot tapped against the ground, and he flapped his dragon wings vigorously. In the next instant, he was already hurtling directly toward his opponent like a golden shooting star. Golden Dragon King, Golden Dragon King, Golden Dragon King. Raucous cheers rang out like tsunami waves from the spectator stands. What they loved the most about Golden Dragon King was his insane explosive power. Even though all of his matches were quite brief, his brief eruptions of explosive power were enough to get one's blood pumping long after his matches had concluded. Phantom King's body flashed, and he quickly retreated, displaying no intention of fighting fire with fire. His 7 soul rings consisted of 4 purples and 3 blacks, and none of them had lit up yet at this point. During his movement process, his entire body seemed to have turned completely transparent. He was so fast that he reached the other end of the competition platform in virtually the blink of an eye, leaving a trail of after images in his wake. He was even faster than Tang Wuling while using his Golden Dragon wings. What incredible speed! This was an agility attack system Soulmaster. Tang Wuling stopped at the center of the competition platform and appraised his opponent with an intense gaze. As he had moved through the air, his wings had only opened up slightly to adjust his bodily balance, which meant that he was displaying this incredible speed even without flying. In terms of regulation speed, he was faster than Tang Wuling. Generally, when facing an opponent like this, the best way to counter them was to unleash an attack that covered a large area, thereby affording them no avenues for evasion. It was often the case that when one possessed extraordinary speed, their defenses would most likely be quite lackluster. However, not only was this Phantom King extremely fast, he also possessed abilities to weaken his opponent's attacks, and only then was he able to make it to this point. The combination of his unique abilities had also allowed him to forge quite a reputation and given him the nickname of Phantom King. He was always able to find his opponent's weakness, then end the battle with a single fatal blow. Tang Wuling waved a hand through the air, and his golden dragon spear appeared in his grasp. The spear was over 4.5 meters long, and in his suit of golden battle armor, he was already over 3 meters tall, and he appeared even more intimidating and dazzling with his long spear in his hand. In terms of appearance, there was no one as spectacular as him in the entire competition. Tang Wuling slowly raised the golden dragon spear in his hand. You're trying to counter me with pure speed? Hey, let's see if you can truly withstand my attack. He immediately identified his opponent's strategy, which was to wear him down and defeat him, but that was not going to be an easy strategy to implement. Ever since he had gained complete control over his newfound strength, he had never unleashed it with all his might. Now, he was planning to test things out to see if control had truly reached a sufficiently proficient standard. He pointed his golden dragon spear forward, aiming it directly at Phantom King. At this point, there were over 500 meters between them. Even for beings at their cultivation ranks, this was a relatively safe distance. In particular, an agility attack system Soulmaster would have more than enough time to react with such a large distance between them and their opponent. However, in the instant that Tang Wuling pointed his golden dragon spear at Phantom King, a bone-chilling sensation suddenly welled up in number 142's heart for some reason. Can he still directly attack me from so far away? Just as he was feeling rather perplexed, Tang Wuling sprang into action. He abruptly lunged forward with his left foot before stomping it heavily into the ground. A massive crater instantly appeared on the competition platform, and the surrounding ground shattered in massive chunks. At the same time, his body abruptly accelerated and was propelled through the air. In the instant that he sprang into action, Phantom King immediately reacted. He also accelerated, and his third soul ring lit up while his body moved horizontally like an illusionary shadow. His third soul skill was one that enhanced his speed, and after many years of cultivation, not only was he extraordinarily fast, his control over his own speed and his own body was also near perfect. So he was extremely adept at evading enemy attacks. However, right at this moment, he was greeted by the sound of a thunderous roar of fury. Roar. A loud dragon's roar erupted throughout the entire competition venue, and a massive golden dragon head appeared around Tang Wuling's body. The golden dragon head had a diameter of over 5 meters, and golden ripples appeared all over the entire competition platform as it let loose that thunderous roar. Phantom King was largely immune to most physical attacks, but he certainly wasn't immune to shockwaves. He was momentarily stunned by this almighty roar, which slowed down his reaction speed slightly. However, as soon as he realized that he was potentially in a bad situation, he immediately reacted, and his 7th soul ring abruptly lit up. His entire body turned into an almost gaseous state, and this was his Phantom True Body. This was the greatest trump card for all 7 ring soul sages, and under the enhancements of his battle armor, his martial soul True Body would undoubtedly be in its most powerful state. However, during the time that it had taken him to release his 7th soul skill, Tang Wuling flapped his wings vigorously and reached his opponent in a flash. His golden dragon spear pierced through the air toward Phantom King like lightning, and a platinum spear projection erupted from it, turning his blue phantom body into the same color as the dazzling platinum light. Phantom King immediately reacted as he turned his body to the side, evading the spear projection while pouncing directly toward Tang Wuling. A chilling sensation washed over Tang Wuling's body, and the Phantom King was too fast for him to evade. In the instant that the two of them came into contact with one another, Phantom King tried to pass through his body with his illusionary phantom body. A bone-chilling sensation immediately spread through Tang Wuling's body, striking him with a sense of paralysis. However, he merely gave a cold internal chuckle as his dragon core expanded violently like a heart before contracting forcefully. Tremendous blood essence fluctuations were immediately pumped throughout his entire body, and a layer of reddish golden light appeared over his skin. Phantom King let loose a howl of anguish, and his body instantly became even more insubstantial. Just as Tang Wuling had predicted, the extreme yang attribute of his bloodline aura was the natural bane of phantoms. He didn't even need to turn around as he thrust the rear tip of his golden dragon spear backward, aiming it directly at Phantom King. Just as Phantom King let loose that howl of pain, his 4th soul ring lit up, and his body suddenly split up into 2 phantoms, then into 4, and the 4 phantoms flew away toward different directions. Back when he had faced Yue Zhengyu, he had used this soul skill to make Yue Zhengyu expend a large amount of his holy energy, and only then was he able to find an opportunity to secure victory in the end. As soon as he discovered that Tang Wuling's bloodline aura had a crippling effect on him, he immediately chose to flee and open up some distance before reassessing his opponent. However, Tang Wuling certainly wasn't going to afford him that opportunity. He stomped his right foot onto the ground in a vicious manner, and powerful shockwaves abruptly erupted forth in a diameter of 30 meters. 8 golden dragons then rose up from the ground, surrounding this space and forming a cage-like structure. What was even more fearsome was that countless platinum spear projections were suddenly unleashed from Tang Wuling's golden dragon spear, and they hurtled directly toward Phantom King. From the golden dragon roar to the golden dragon shakes the earth, the sequence of actions Tang Wuling had taken was to abruptly accelerate before thrusting his spear forward. Reddish golden bloodline aura then erupted from his body, following which he unleashed his golden dragon shakes the earth to conjure up the 8 golden dragons, then unleashed countless spear projections at once. The entire process had only taken the span of a breath or two, and the spectators were completely entranced. In the hearts of the vast majority of the spectators, particularly among those who weren't soul masters, the same thought reflexively welled up in their hearts. This was how a powerful soul master fought. Phantom King let loose a sharp cry, and the blue light radiating from his body suddenly became brighter. The 4 phantoms were clearly unable to escape, so they abruptly converged and combined as one again. Immediately thereafter, the phantom body transformed into a blue needle, and as opposed to attempting to flee from the scene, the needle hurtled directly toward Tang Wuling. He was unleashing an attack that Tang Wuling had to address. Chapter 1044. The cage formed by the golden dragon shakes the earth stood around the needle, while countless spear projections were hurtling toward it from behind. Even if Phantom King could forcibly flee from this perilous situation, he would definitely be severely wounded, so his only chance was to unleash a counterattack. However, Tang Wuling most definitely wasn't going to give him that chance. The blue needle quickly evaded the spear projections, using its immense spiritual power to predict the trajectories of the oncoming spear projection. All of a sudden, 2 bursts of purple light erupted from Tang Wuling's eyes like lightning, shining directly upon the blue needle. It was none other than his purple demon eyes spiritual attack. As opposed to being alarmed, Phantom King was ecstatic to see this, and the blue light radiating from the needle brightened even further. Was his opponent trying to engage him in a clash of spiritual power? This had always been his true trump card to begin with. However, in the instant that their spiritual powers clashed, he was stunned to discover that Tang Wuling's spiritual world was like a boundless abyss. In the next instant, he was struck by an indescribably warm and comfortable feeling as his spiritual power was entirely enveloped by Tang Wuling's mind. How is this possible? I've already reached the spirit abyss realm. It was extremely rare for a 7 ring soul sage to reach the spirit abyss realm, and didn't this golden dragon king's forte lay in strength and explosiveness? Why? Phantom King didn't get to finish that thought as in the next instant. The immobilized blue needle in the air was completely destroyed by the countless oncoming spear projections. Phantom King's body reappeared in midair, and he'd already returned to his original form. The 8 golden dragons from the golden dragon shakes the earth immediately pounced on him before striking his martial soul true body one after another. 8 resounding booms rang out in rapid succession, and terrifying shockwaves erupted through the air. It had to be said that this Phantom King possessed very powerful physical resistance, to the extent that each golden dragon was only able to minimize its body slightly. Under the protection of his suit of battle armor, he was able to filter out most of the power from Tang Wulin's attack, but unfortunately, this didn't prove to be enough to save him in the end. After the golden dragon spear was hurled forth like a bolt of golden lightning and hurtled toward him while radiating immense blood essence power, the battle was already decided. Phantom King attempted to grab onto the golden dragon spear with his hands, but by the time the golden dragon spear reached him, it had already completely turned into a reddish golden color. As soon as the reddish golden spear projection came into contact with his battered martial soul true body, it adopted a gaseous state again, and in the end, the spear passed through him, leaving a massive gaping hole in its wake. Just as the golden dragon spear was about to strike the other side of the competition platform, it was summoned back to Tang Wulin. You. Phantom King only had the chance to utter a single word before his body instantly crumbled, and he disappeared as specks of light on the competition platform. The victory goes to number 33. The referee's voice rang out across the entire venue. Tang Wulin rested his golden dragon spear on the ground with the other tip pointing diagonally up into the heavens. The entire competition venue instantly erupted into a complete frenzy. The vast majority of them supported Golden Dragon King, but who would have thought that he'd be able to defeat Phantom King in such a short time? Wasn't Phantom King supposed to have an advantage? Wasn't he supposed to be virtually immune to physical attacks? What had happened? Phantom King's immunities didn't seem to have taken effect at all, and Tang Wulin had dominated him throughout the entire battle. After an explosive string of attacks, Phantom King was completely steamrolled, and the commentator was so embarrassed that he wanted to bury himself. Was Phantom King really at an advantage during that matchup? Why did it look as if he were at a crippling disadvantage instead? Phantom King had performed extremely well during the preceding round robin stage. Why did he appear so vulnerable and fragile in the face of Golden Dragon King? This was as crushing a victory as one could imagine, and Phantom King had no chance at all throughout the entire battle. Tang Wulin's Golden Dragon King bloodline had completely dominated him, to the extent that its effect was even more potent than that of light attribute powers. Phantoms were considered to be existences with no elemental affiliations, and even though they were fearful toward light and holy attributes, they went completely powerless against those attributes. They possessed the yin attribute, which was not the same as the darkness elemental attribute. However, Tang Wulin's bloodline was of an extreme yang attribute, and it just so happened to completely dominate Phantom King, which was why such a crushing victory had been achieved. Not only was Tang Wulin an assault system battle soul master, he was also a control system battle soul master. Phantom King may have held a speed advantage, but that advantage didn't help him much in the face of Tang Wulin's control skills, and that wasn't even taking into account all of his explosive power. During this match, Tang Wulin had secured victory without even using his blood soul fusion skills, so it had actually been an easier victory than his round robin matches. He had secured a berth in the final 8. He gently waved his golden dragon spear to acknowledge the crowd before being led away by the female server who had brought him to the competition platform. As he walked, the golden light on his body gradually receded as he withdrew his dragon moon battle armor. The female server had been surreptitiously gazing at him this entire time, and even though she was unable to see his true appearance, she managed to catch a brief glimpse of the side profile of his face in the instant that his visor was lifted. Wow, what a perfect side profile. He must be super handsome. The female server's heart rate was accelerating rapidly, and a slightly entranced look appeared in her eyes. He was so young yet so powerful. If only she had a boyfriend like him. After exiting the competition venue and returning to his resting suite, Tang Wulin silently reflected on the battle that had just taken place. His explosiveness had improved yet again, as had his control over his own body. Ever since he had broken his 10th Golden Dragon King seal, his dragon core had become more than twice as powerful as it previously was, and even without using his blue silver emperor vines, his combat prowess exceeded that of the most elite soul sages. As he currently was, he would be able to battle a soul Douluo in a suit of 2-word battle armor with no issues at all, but he still had to keep working hard. His goal was to defeat Blood 9, a title Douluo, and a 3-word battle armor master. If he could defeat Blood 9, then he felt like he had what it took to forge the foundational metals for his suit of 3-word battle armor. Tang Wulin was confident that he'd be able to attain his suit of 3-word battle armor after reaching the soul sage level. The energy provided to him by his 2 major energy cores would be enough to support the energy expended by a suit of 3-word battle armor. Just as Tang Wulin concluded his match, Yue Zhengyu was having quite a difficult time. A sword projection that was as dazzling as a galaxy swept through the air, crashing into her opponent's massive long saber. A screeching clash ensued, and Yue Zhengyu was repelled as she was forced to stumble backward. She had progressed in the second position of her group, so her opponent was first in another group. Her opponent had the number 9 above his head, and he was the only one with a single-digit number to have come this far in the competition. Number 9, Saber Demon. That was his nickname. This was a burly man who was no less muscular than the likes of Long Yue. His face was blurred by the system, making it impossible to glean his appearance, but his body was extremely intimidating and exuded a wild and violent aura. The giant saber in his hand was his martial soul, and it was over 4 meters long. According to official sources, its name was the dragon-slaying saber. The dragon-slaying saber was completely dark red in color, and there were strange patterns running all over its blade. These patterns resembled a series of true dragons with severed bodies. There were 8 soul rings around the saber, consisting of 4 purples and 4 blacks, indicating that this man was an 8-ring soul Douluo. His suit of battle armor was also of the same dark red color as his dragon-slaying saber, and he only needed to roar into the heavens to make the surrounding air tremor violently. Yue Zhengyu had never encountered an opponent with such an abundant aura. His aura was so powerful that it seemed to be able to shatter mountains and part rivers. In the face of her opponent's enormous aura, her sword intent was impacted to an extremely severe degree, and she wasn't even able to be won with her sword. Chapter 1045. Yue Zhengyu and Xu Shaoan were also watching this match, and both of them wore resigned expressions on their faces. Sigh, why did Zhengyu have to come up against him in the first elimination round? This is downright rotten luck. Xu Shaoan sighed. Yue Zhengyu said, this may not be a bad thing. All of us always improve more significantly when battling powerful opponents. So even if Zhengyu loses here, she should benefit immensely from this match. Old man Simmer is still too powerful for us at this point. He should have become a 3-word battle armor master a long time ago, but he has such a bad reputation and so little money that he's still stuck with a suit of 2-word battle armor. Who would have thought that would be a blessing in disguise and allow him to become one of the hot favorites in this competition? Saber Demon Sima Jinkai was the commander of the Southern Legion's Wild Gale Division, and he was also a senior colonel. In the Southern Legion, he had the nickname of Wild Gale Saber Demon, and he was constantly picking fights with everyone. Aside from the handful of most powerful beings in the Legion, no one was a match for him. Even all of the 8-ring 3-word battle armor masters in the Legion were no match for him. He was 42 years of age, and was addicted to honing his saber skills. His greatest hobby was to challenge other people to fights. He was convinced to join the Southern Legion by the Legion commander, who was also Yue Zhengyu's grandfather, and he was constantly challenging the powerful beings within the Legion. Furthermore, he fought in an extremely wild and aggressive manner, which often led to him hurting his sparring partners, so he was the kind of person that everyone tried to avoid. He was the only one in the entire Legion who dared to challenge the Legion commander, and he lost every single battle, which was why he was truly respectful of Yue Zhengyu's grandfather. Otherwise, who would be able to keep him in the military with his personality? The Wild Gale Division was the most powerful division of the Southern Legion. It was a mecha division, but what was quite comical was that its commander, Sima Jinkai, had no idea how to pilot a mecha himself. Instead, he dominated with nothing more than his dragon-slaying saber and suit of 2-word battle armor. Yue Zhengyu's grandfather had always been intentionally holding him back instead of supporting him so he could become a 3-word battle armor master, and he was doing this so Sima Jinkai could build up a stronger foundation. He had once said that if Sima Jinkai could become a title Douluo, then he'd definitely be one of the most powerful title Douluos in the entire world, and if he could become a hyper Douluo, then he could even be powerful enough to pose a challenge to a limit Douluo. In the future, he was definitely going to be the brightest star of the Southern Legion. It was just a pity that his leadership skills were quite lackluster, so he couldn't be entrusted with any high military ranks. This was why he still hadn't become a general despite his immense power. Yue Zhengyu's grandfather had promised to forge him a suit of 3-word battle armor if he could become the champion of this competition, and he'd have to exchange for that suit of battle armor with the awards he received as champion. As such, he emerged as number 1 in their group, and Yue Zhengyu could only strive for number 2, but unfortunately he fell at the final hurdle, losing to Phantom King. When Yue Zhengyu Zhengyu and Xu Shaoan had first joined the Southern Legion, Sima Jinkai hadn't thought much of him. However, their friendship was forged through battle as Yue Zhengyu was able to last 10 minutes against him in a battle. This completely changed Sima Jinkai's opinion of him, but it was exactly because he'd fought Sima Jinkai that Yue Zhengyu knew just how fearsome this man was. He was only a sole Douluo, but his actual combat prowess exceeded that of most titled Douluos. The odds being offered for him becoming the final champion were only 1 to 2, placing him even above Pang Wulin as the one with the second highest odds, and he was second only to someone who was even more insane. As such, Yue Zhengyu was extremely unlucky to have encountered Wild Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai in the first elimination round, but no one could do anything about that. Sima Jinkai's massive dragon-slaying saber was resting on his shoulder, and there was a hint of surprise in his heart as he appraised the young woman before him. From her blood essence fluctuations, he could sense that Yue Zhengyu was quite young, but her star god sword had been quite troublesome for him to deal with. In fact, it could even be said that her sword had posed a threat to him. Such an opponent was not very common for him. Yue Zhengyu was panting slightly, but that wasn't from exertion. Instead, she was being struck by a sense of asphyxiation in the face of her opponent's immense powers. He was too powerful. His saber techniques and saber intent were both superior to hers. In reality, Sima Jinkai had only attacked 3 times with his saber during the course of the battle thus far, yet each and every attack had posed a massive threat to her. Yue Zhengyu took a deep breath to calm her own churning blood essence, and a determined look appeared on her face. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and specks of starlight appeared around her. Even her battle armor was glowing, and it was as if countless specks of starlight were emerging from her body, radiating the most dazzling light in the process. Yue Zhengyu's 6th soul ring finally lit up, and immediately thereafter, she closed her eyes while gripping onto the hilt of her star god sword with both hands. Sima Jinkai raised an eyebrow slightly, and he was surprised to discover that his opponent's aura had changed. This was an indescribable feeling akin to the feeling that he'd experienced previously back when he had made a certain breakthrough in his saber intent. This was a feeling of evolution and being elevated to a higher level, except on this occasion, it was his opponent who was undergoing this evolution. The specks of starlight that had appeared around Yue Zhengyu began to undergo an intriguing transformation. They suddenly became extremely bright, as if they'd been set alight. Immediately thereafter, they really were vaporized, transforming into wisps of light that revolved around her body. She also slowly raised her star god sword before her, and the wisps of starlight around her body all converged toward her sword. Her star god sword began to glow brighter and brighter, and at the same time, it gradually began to expand. The sword itself wasn't what was expanding. Instead, it was a transparent, yet extremely dazzling sword projection. The sword projection was constantly flickering slightly, yet it was giving off a sense of sentience. There was no overwhelming pressure emanating from it, but as it appeared, Sima Jinkai's expression changed drastically. The dragon-slaying saber that was resting on his shoulder descended, and a look of unadulterated shock appeared in his eyes. Even he had only reached this level after becoming a soul sage, yet it was quite apparent from the energy fluctuations emanating from his opponent's body that she definitely wasn't a soul sage yet. Sima Jinkai had never been a believer of prodigies. He only believed in hard work and determination. However, that deep-rooted belief was suddenly beginning to waver. Could it be that there really were prodigies in this world? Otherwise, how was this young woman able to achieve this? In the eyes of the audience, the sword projection that had appeared didn't look all that spectacular. However, Sima Jinkai knew that this wasn't just a soul skill or a manifestation of her sword intent. It wasn't even something becoming one with one's sword could compare with. This was a sword soul, regardless of the type of weapon one was using. If one were to develop a deep enough understanding of it, they'd be able to awaken the soul within the weapon. As a powerful being who had already forged a saber soul, he was now faced with an opponent who possessed a sword soul. The lackadaisical demeanor in his heart vanished, and it was replaced by a far more serious approach. An opponent like this was worthy of his respect. He could clearly recall that only after forging his saber soul did his powers truly begin to increase at a rapid rate, and that was what had propelled him to become the most powerful being in the Southern Legion below the hyper Douluo level. However, this young woman was clearly far younger than he was, and even if she had only just attained her sword soul, it wouldn't take her long to become a truly powerful being. Nice. Intense battle intent welled up in Sima Jinkai's heart. The dragon-slaying saber in his right hand rested by his side as his 7th soul ring lit up. Regardless of whether it was a sword soul or saber soul, it could only be formed as a subsidiary to a soul skill. Yue Zhengyu's sword soul was a subsidiary of her 6th soul skill, while his saber soul was a subsidiary of his 7th soul skill, his dragon-slaying true body. A burst of anguished cries that sounded akin to dragon's roars erupted around Sima Jinkai's body, and a massive saber projection appeared in front of his dragon-slaying saber. In the instant that it appeared, everyone felt as if they were witnessing the imagery of a giant dragon being sliced in half by that saber projection. The saber projection was around 30 meters in length with the dragon-slaying saber as its origin point, and in the instant that it appeared, a massive rift emerged on the competition platform. The rift had no bottom in sight, as if it were a miniature abyss. Even the earth and the air were being sliced apart, and that was a testament to just how powerful his saber soul was. However, Yue Zhengyu seemed to be completely oblivious to the transformation that her opponent was undergoing. A faint layer of light had appeared over her face, and her eyes were glowing as brightly as stars. She had already raised her star god sword above her head, and at the tip of the sword, a sword projection that was around 10 meters tall had already taken shape. It was no longer flickering and wavering, and it was giving off an aura of peerless sharpness. Sword, star, soul. Chapter 1046. Yue Zhengyu uttered the 3 words one after another with a pause in between each word, and with each word that was uttered, the sword projection emanating from the top of her star god sword would elongate by 3 meters. As she swung the extremely heavy sword through the air, a galaxy seemed to have cascaded down from above, and even though the two of them were situated several hundred meters away from one another, the massive sword projection reached Sima Jinkai in a flash. Sima Jinkai's expression changed slightly, and he immediately swept his dragon-slaying saber upward without any hesitation. The anguished howls of giant dragons erupted throughout the heavens, while the sword projection that was the sword star soul came crashing down like a terrifying galaxy. The match hadn't been progressing for a very long time, yet the final flash had already commenced. In the instant that the saber soul and sword soul came into contact with one another, the sky was suddenly torn apart, and the entire competition platform began to tremor violently. Immediately thereafter, a massive black vortex appeared at the center of their clash. Countless stars were being devoured, and the anguished dragon howls also ceased. All of the spectators looked on with bated breath, and in the next instant, a sound that was akin to that of the entire world being shattered rang out. The ground was pulverized, and several dozens of massive dashes suddenly appeared at the center of the competition platform. Boom, boom, boom. A string of resounding booms rang out as countless streaks of light were shattered in the air. Sharp sword projections and violent saber projections clashed with all their might on the competition platform. Yue Zhengyu and Xu Shaoan were completely flabbergasted as they stared at the soul screen before them. Is she already this powerful? Is that a sword soul? Xu Shaoan was staring blankly at the flurry of lights that had spread across the entire screen. Yue Zhengyu's hands had already unconsciously clenched into tight fists. He had said to Xu Shaoan that his loss to Phantom King wasn't entirely a matter of bad luck, but in his heart, he naturally couldn't shake the thought that he'd been robbed of a place in the final elimination stages simply due to the fact that his opponent had been luckier than him. However, that thought had been completely banished by him now. If he had possessed absolute power, so what if his opponent was luckier than him? As he watched the battle between Yue Zhengyu and Sima Jinkai, he had only one thought in his mind. He had to become more powerful. He was a direct lineal descendant of the Holy Angel clan. He couldn't be left behind by his friends no matter what. He abruptly rose to his feet before taking a deep breath. I'm going to cultivate. He then immediately turned and left. Xu Shaoan glanced at the screen, then at the departing Yue Zhengyu, and she also stood up, but a smile appeared on her face. Good on ya, Zhengyu, but we won't be losing to you. As soon as her voice trailed off, she immediately hurried off behind Yue Zhengyu. The rumbling booms persisted for close to 20 seconds before they finally gradually began to subside, and only one figure was left standing on the platform. The massive dragon-slaying saber fell onto the ground, and its surface was riddled with countless sword marks. Yue Zhengyu had already completely disappeared at some point during the fearsome clash. You possess a fantastic sword. Sima Jinkai yelled out his praise for his opponent, and only after that did he walk off the platform with his dragon-slaying saber resting on his shoulder. The star cabin was opened, and Yue Zhengyu sat up within it. Her entire body had taken on an unhealthily ashy pallor. Sister Zhengyu, are you all right? Shu Lizzie's concerned voice rang out from outside. Lizzie, Yue Zhengyu groaned before slumping back into the star cabin. Shu Lizzie rushed into the room like a fat tornado before hurriedly scooping Yue Zhengyu out of the star cabin and placing her on the bed. Yue Zhengyu was still completely naked at this point, but that was the last thing currently on his mind. Her aura was very feeble, but thankfully, her heart rate was still very stable. It was quite clear that she completely overexerted herself. There was no soul power exertion in the star cabin, but one could still overexert their spiritual power and mental energy. It was certainly no easy task to unleash such a sword strike, and she'd never used her sword soul without any reservation like that before. Begin. Yuanen Yehui was appraising her opponent with an intense gaze. Her opponent had a medium build, and his appearance was completely nondescript. The information about this opponent flashed through her mind. Number 222's nickname was Asura King, and his martial soul was the bloodthirsty lion. Among the top 16, he had the 7th highest odds. He had emerged as first in his group, and he was renowned for his vicious battle style as he was always taking down his opponents in a very brutal and vicious manner. But he was indeed very powerful. He was a 2-word battle armor master, and he was definitely among the cream of the crop of all 7 ring soul sages. Yuanen Yehui's eyes were slightly narrowed as she stood on the spot, and she was currently in her male disguise. She also appeared to be completely ordinary and nondescript, making it very difficult for one to deduce her strengths from her physical attributes. Yuanen Yehui had emerged as second in her group from the round robin stage. The one who had taken out the first position was none other than the biggest favorite of the entire competition with odds of 1 to 1.5. He was indeed too powerful for her at her current power level. The referee descended, and just like in the other matches, after confirming that both parties were ready, the referee announced the commencement of the match. How? Asura King immediately threw his head back and let loose a few deafening roars, immediately setting the crowd alight and drawing waves of raucous cheers. In terms of outward appearances, Yuanen Yehui and his Asura King actually bore somewhat of a resemblance, but as soon as the match began, the two of them adopted vastly different forms. As he howled to the heavens, a layer of crimson light abruptly erupted from Asura King's body. At this stage of the competition, no one was taking things lightly, and he immediately donned his suit of 2-word battle armor. Crimson fur instantly appeared all over his body, and he immediately began to become more muscular and imposing in stature. In addition to his battle armor, he was already over 4 meters tall, and his entire body was exuding a bloodthirsty aura. The bloodthirsty lion martial soul possessed an innate bloodthirst ability, allowing him to constantly maintain a state that was akin to what one would experience after consuming Shu Lizzie's bloodthirsty red bean bun, but at the same time, he could ensure that he remained completely conscious. The only downside was that all soul masters who possessed bloodthirsty lion martial souls were quite eccentric, and they often had a hard time exercising restraint during battles, hence his vicious tendencies. 7 soul rings, 3 purple and 4 black, emerged from beneath his feet. All of the participants who had made it to this point had far superior soul ring configurations than the average soul master. Yuanen Yehui didn't create as much of a commotion as her opponent did. She merely rushed forward, quickly approaching her opponent while 6 soul rings also rose up around her. Her eyes were narrowed slightly as she appraised her opponent, and Asura King was also looking at her. At the same time, the crimson light shimmering from his eyes became even more pronounced as Yuanen Yehui hadn't even donned her suit of battle armor before rushing toward him. She had emerged as second in her group, yet she wasn't even releasing her battle armor against him. He decided there and then that he was going to give his opponent a gruesome death. Tearing them apart from limb to limb seemed like an appealing idea. With that in mind, Asura King also rushed toward Yuanen Yehui, and only now did the latter release her martial soul. Halos of light began to erupt from her body, and the air around her suddenly began to surge violently. Her body swelled in size as she released her titan giant ape martial soul, and she instantly reached over 6 meters tall. Her crystalline yellow battle armor also appeared over her body, but it didn't have any wings. Asura King suddenly came to an abrupt halt before spreading his arms on either side of his body. Sharp claws emerged from all his fingertips, and the claws extended to around 3 feet in length. The sharp crimson claws were releasing a faint odor of blood and gore, and Asura King let loose a roar of fury as he sprang up like lightning, instantly leaping to right above Yuanen Yehui before swiping his claws down toward her head. His speed was very fast, and he resembled a bolt of crimson lightning. Not only was this man an assault system battle soul master, he possessed speed that was not inferior to that of an agility attack system soul master of the same caliber. Chapter 1047. Instead of taking any evasive measures, Yuanen Yehui launched her right fist directly toward her opponent. Asura King harumphed coldly, and his sharp claws continued to descend. His bloodthirsty lion claws were peerlessly sharp and powerful, and he was slashing them directly toward Yuanen Yehui's fist. The scenes that were about to unfold had already surfaced in his mind. He was going to destroy his opponent's arms, then descend from the sky and break open their battle armor with a string of consecutive attacks. After that, he was going to put his opponent out of their misery by grabbing onto their legs and tearing their body in half. However, those thoughts had only just appeared in his mind when he sensed that something was amiss. In the instant that Yuanen Yehui unleashed her punch, the surrounding area had suddenly become extremely quiet. All of the whistling air had suddenly vanished, and it was as if all of the air had congealed. Immediately thereafter, his claws came into contact with his opponent's fists, but he felt as if he'd struck a soft pile of cotton. All of a sudden, an indescribable burst of gentle and supple force erupted from the figurative pile of cotton, wrenching his body to the side. He had absolute confidence in his own strength and speed, and he knew that Yuanen Yehui was also renowned for her strength, so he didn't think that he would lose in a clash where both sets of his claws were opposing a single one of her fists. However, what was inexplicable to him was how this simple-looking punch was acting like a vortex that was throwing him off balance. There was also a strange type of rotational suction force erupting from Yuanen Yehui's fist, and over half of his claw's offensive power was immediately nullified. Immediately thereafter, the rotational force suddenly began to rotate in reverse, and the two types of force that were rotating in different directions instantly combined as one to form an irresistible burst of immense power. Asura King had an extremely plentiful wealth of battle experience, and he hurriedly bent both of his own arms while activating his soul power to protect himself. Bam! His entire body was sent flying backward for several dozens of meters before landing on the ground. This seemed like a rather lengthy and complex process, but in reality, everything had taken place in the blink of an eye. In the eyes of the spectators, the two combatants rushed toward one another, following which Yuanen Yehui's body expanded in size, and she was able to send Asura King flying with a single punch. After landing on the ground, Asura King immediately let loose a roar of fury. He hunched down into a half-squatting stance, and his third soul ring lit up. Immediately thereafter, he slashed his claws through the air, and countless claw projections hurtled toward Yuanen Yehui like a crimson sea, sealing off all avenues for her to advance. Yuanen Yehui remained completely unflustered as she abruptly lunged forward before unleashing another punch. What was different from the last punch was that on this occasion, she'd drawn back her arm to inject more venom into the punch, and at the same time, her third soul ring lit up. Diamond Titan. A layer of dark golden light appeared all over her body, and in the instant that she launched her fist through the air, it was as if all of the air on the entire competition platform had been sucked away. The countless claw projections suddenly began to rotate in the face of her fists, and a vortex appeared at the center of the Crimson Sea. Yuanen Yehui then unleashed 3 more consecutive punches, and 4 vortexes appeared in the Crimson Sea. The vortexes instantly fused as one and shattered the Crimson Sea. Terrifying fist intent erupted forth in the aftermath of the explosion, hurtling directly toward Asura King. What kind of soul skill was this? Asura King raised his arms before him, and his body was sent flying back with a mere resounding boom. His battle armor shimmered rapidly, and only then was he able to withstand the force of Yuanen Yehui's attack. If one had to describe Yuanen Yehui's battle style, then the best expression to use would be that it was simple and unadorned. Each and every one of her punches seemed to abide by the paramount laws of the world, and they weren't particularly flashy or glamorous, but they unleashed incredible destructive power. At this point, Yuanen Yehui had already completely immersed herself in her own fist intent. After identifying her future path forward, all of her soul skills had been integrated toward her divine cloud vortex fists. To put it in simpler terms, all of the soul skills that she'd relied on in the past were now a part of her divine cloud vortex fists. She was constantly perfecting the process of fusing her soul skills into her fist techniques, and only after combining her Tang Sect techniques, twin martial souls, her personal understanding of fist intent, and her observations of the clouds around the mountain peak did she invent her divine cloud vortex fists. During these past few months, she had cultivated without any distractions, and her powers had increased at a rapid rate. The foundation of her divine cloud vortex fists had already been completely established, and it was significantly bolstering her combat prowess. Asura King only managed to arrest his own momentum with great difficulty, and his expression had darkened significantly. He had seen Yuanen Yehui's past battle footage, and from that footage, it appeared that she was nothing special. She was only relying on the immense strength of her Herculean divine ape to secure one victory after another, and there was nothing that stood out about her. However, only after actually facing her did he come to realize just how wrong he'd been in his assessment. His opponent was far more powerful than he'd anticipated. Just from those 2 clashes alone, his opponent had displayed powers that definitely weren't inferior to his. All of the disdain that he'd held toward his opponent was instantly wiped away as he rose up into the air. A pair of crimson wings spread open on his back, and his second soul ring lit up as his body was enshrouded under a layer of light that resembled crackling lightning. His body swayed, and he instantly arrived beside Yuanen Yehui. He abruptly lashed out with his claws, and a crimson claw projection immediately reached her from the side. After unleashing that attack, he immediately flapped his wings again before arriving on her other side and unleashing the same attack. Just as Yuanen Yehui had a self-invented soul skill, he also had a self-invented soul skill of his own, which he'd named Lightning Asura Claws. His first soul skill, Blood Tiger tiger claws, and his second soul skill, lightning body, were used as a foundation in conjunction with his immense overall powers. The final result was that he was able to unleash powerful attacks while constantly being on the move. His lightning Asura claws perfectly combined his offensive prowess as an assault system battle soul master and his speed of an agility attack system soul master, and he had defeated countless powerful enemies in the past with this technique. As expected, Yuanen Yehui was unable to keep up with his speed. The Titan giant ape was quite massive in size, and her forte didn't lie in her speed to begin with. She unleashed her ghost shadow perplexing track to evade a few of Asura King's first attacks, but she was already looking a little disheveled. As opposed to unleashing any punches, Yuanen Yehui was only adopting evasive measures, and soon, a series of claw marks had begun to appear on her battle armor. Her opponent was too fast, and even though she could withstand his attacks for now, this was definitely not a situation that she wanted to maintain. Asura King was like a bolt of crimson lightning, constantly darting around her to sap her energy while searching for a fatal chink in her defenses. Asura King wasn't worried at all that Yuanen Yehui would unleash some of her more powerful soul skills. On the contrary, it was something that he wanted to see. The more powerful the soul skill, the more energy it expended, and releasing powerful soul skills in a blind panic would only create more chances for him. Yuanen Yehui was clearly aware of this, so she didn't unleash any further soul skills. Instead, she was evading as best as she could with her ghost shadow perplexing track while keeping her fists close to her sides. Asura King's entire body was radiating a bloodthirsty light, but he was extremely calm. In contrast, Yuanen Yehui was looking a little ragged, but she was also dealing with her opponent's attacks in a calm and collected manner, so he wasn't able to press his advantage. However, he wasn't concerned at all by this. There was no way that Yuanen Yehui could continue to calmly handle his attacks for a prolonged period of time, and maintaining this situation was clearly beneficial to him. He was merely continuing to use his first and second soul skills, whereas Yuanen Yui's Diamond Titan possessed powerful defensive properties, but it definitely expended more of her energy than it took for him to maintain his first and second soul skills. All of a sudden, Yuanen Yehui stumbled slightly, and massive weakness appeared around her armpit region. Asura King's eyes lit up as he immediately reached out to attack, but right before he did so, he paused slightly before abruptly springing up into the air. As opposed to attacking Yuanen Yui's armpit region, he chose to attack her head instead. She was clearly intentionally exposing a weakness to bait him into attacking, and he wasn't going to fall for it. However, right at this moment, the stumbling Yuanen Yehui unleashed another punch, and she seemed to be attacking the air. That's right, her fist was striking empty air. All of a sudden, Asura King's expression stiffened as he discovered that an extremely terrifying burst of suction force was erupting toward him. Yuanen Yehui had lashed out with her right fist, and as it struck the air, she made a pushing motion with her left hand. A burst of indescribably terrifying power abruptly erupted from her body, and her fourth soul ring also lit up, Devil Titan. This was immediately followed by her sixth soul ring. Asura King immediately felt his flesh begin to crawl. As a soul sage, he was extremely sensitive to danger, and he'd always trusted his own instincts. As such, he immediately unleashed his seventh soul skill without any hesitation, and his body quickly transformed in midair. As he was being drawn in by the suction force, he transformed into a massive crimson lion. It was none other than his bloodthirsty lion true body. After entering his martial soul true body state, his offensive and defensive prowess would be more than doubled. He didn't know what Yuanen Yehui was doing, but he was confident in his own abilities to withstand her attacks. All of a sudden, a massive vortex appeared, and all of the spectators could see that the vortex was of a light yellow color. The vortex encompassed the entire competition platform, and the outskirts of the vortex were of a very faint yellow color, whereas the yellow around Yuanen Yui's body was extremely dark. Chapter 1048. The vortex then seemed to form a gigantic hand, and even after Asura King released his martial soul true body, he was still instantly dragged over to Yuanen Yehui. It looked as if the Asura King had voluntarily charged toward Yuanen Yui's fist. The bloodthirst lion true body was struck on the shoulder in a completely soundless manner. There was no resounding boom, and he wasn't sent flying, either. However, in that instant, Asura King felt as if everything within his body was being stirred up. Immediately thereafter, he was greeted by the sight of a vast expanse of fist projections. Yuanen Yui's body seemed to have suddenly become illusionary, and her originally slow and cumbersome massive ape body was now fluttering around as light as a butterfly. Her fist projections encompassed every single inch of Asura King's entire body. All of a sudden, a strange buzzing sound rang from Asura King's body, immediately following which his bloodthirsty lion true body was completely shattered as limbs flew through the air and blood mist dispersed in all directions. Strangely enough, the blood mist also formed a series of vortexes of different sizes as they drifted through the air, and only after a few seconds did the blood begin to rain down onto the competition platform. What? The commentators had no idea what to say as they were at a complete loss with regard to how this battle had just been ended. Yuanen Yehui landed on the ground, and her body shrank down to its original nondescript appearance. Her fists were even looking a little petite in her current form, but who would dare to underestimate those fists now? Fist King. Fist King. Someone began the chant first, and immediately thereafter, all of the spectators began to join in. From that moment forth, Yuanen Yehui had also earned a nickname for herself, as well as a spot in the top 8. There seemed to be images constantly flickering across Yuanen Yui's eyes as she reflected on that battle. Defeating Asura King definitely hadn't been an easy task, particularly when she hadn't used her second martial soul. This was the first time that her divine cloud vortex fists had come up against such a powerful opponent. She had missed out on her round-robin match against the participant who went on to emerge as first in her group as she had reached a critical juncture in the cultivation of her divine cloud vortex fists at the time. That weakness that she displayed was indeed something that she'd intentionally revealed, but at the same time, it really was a weakness that could be exploited. The psychological warfare tactics that she'd learned on the demonic island were extremely effective in battle. She was naturally aware that with her opponent's wealth of battle experience, he definitely wouldn't fall for her tricks, but it was exactly because of this that he fell into her trap in the end. In a sense, he outsmarted himself. Due to his last-second decision to change the target of his attack, Asura King's speed had decelerated for an instant, and she had been accumulating power throughout the entire process in which she'd been taking evasive measures, and she took advantage of that split-second window of opportunity to strike. Her Devil Titan combined with her divine cloud vortex fists completely controlled the airflow in the surrounding area, and her sixth soul skill, Titan Grip, forcibly dragged her opponent toward her and threw his body off balance in the process. Immediately thereafter, she unleashed an explosive barrage of attacks, and that had been the key to her victory. As long as her opponent was within a certain range, she was invincible. Yuanen Yehui clenched her fists tightly, and at the same time, another figure surfaced in her mind. This was a man with golden dragon scales all over his body, and he also possessed a pair of sharp claws. She could only truly be considered to be invincible in melee combat among all cultivators of her caliber if she could defeat him. Captain, have you made it to the quarterfinals? Tang Wolin spent some federal credits to watch the replays of the matches in the round of 16, paying particularly close attention to Yuanen Yehui and New Zealand's matches. At this moment, his heart was filled with astonishment and excitement. He wasn't the only one who had been improving. While it was indeed true that he'd been progressing very quickly, his friends certainly weren't making slow progress either. Let's keep improving together, everyone. He didn't contact them after their matches. After such high-intensity battles, they needed time to reflect and learn from their experiences. This had always been a cultivation method that was unique to Shrek Academy. All of their opponents in these final stages were extremely powerful. Yue Zhengyu had already improved drastically, but she still lost to that wild gale Saber demon, Sima Jinkai. An 8-ring soul Douluo with a Saber soul was definitely enough to pose a threat to him. On top of that, there was also that man, the one who had progressed in the first position from Yuanen Yui's group. He had only taken 3 seconds to defeat his opponent in this round, and it was the fastest among all 8 matches. It was said that his odds had lowered even further, and it was undoubtedly the case that both of these people were opponents that he had to face, and only after defeating them would he be able to complete his mission. He wouldn't have it any other way. What would be the point in brushing aside a bunch of weak opponents en route to an easy championship title? After a brief moment of excitement, Tang Wolin resumed his arduous cultivation. Congratulations. I didn't think that you would have improved to such an extent already. Ling Yaoshu had nothing but praise for her disciple. After watching the entirety of her trial, she had been well and truly stunned. Gu Yuna's performance during the trial couldn't even just be described as perfect. It was more than perfect. Even the chairman of the Spirit Pagoda had been alerted to her performance, and at just 21 years of age, she became the youngest backup spirit envoy in the entire history of the Spirit Pagoda. The chairman of the Spirit Pagoda had even said that if Gu Yuna could become an 8-ring soul Douluo and attain a suit of 3-word battle armor, he'd make make an exception for her and promote her to become an official spirit envoy, which would make her one of the highest-ranking members of the Spirit Pagoda. Gu Yuna was extraordinarily talented, and she was definitely by far the brightest young talent the Spirit Pagoda had to offer. The aptitude that she had displayed outstripped that of even Leng Yaoshu, and even the chairman of the Spirit Pagoda had to approach Leng Yaoshu in a polite manner to discuss whether Gu Yuna could become one of the candidates to succeed his position as chairman. Thank you, teacher. Gu Yuna nodded calmly in response, seemingly completely unperturbed by all of the praise and attention that had been showered on her. Leng Yaoshu sighed. You're growing up every single day while I continue to grow older. The Spirit Pagoda will fall into the hands of you young people in the future. Gu Yuna shook her head and countered. You're not old at all, teacher, and I'm still far from being worthy of your praise. Leng Yaoshu smiled and said, stop being so modest. You're only a 7-ring soul sage, yet you were able to virtually completely dominate a titled Douluo when neither of you were using your suits of battle armor. If you're still putting yourself down, then old-timers like us shouldn't even live anymore. If you ask me, you're going to become unfathomably powerful when you reach the titled Douluo level. By the way, your spiritual power has already reached the spirit domain realm, right? Otherwise, there's no way that you could have controlled elements to such a degree. Gu Yuna nodded in response. Leng Yaoshu's eyes immediately lit up. That's fantastic. You must be tired, right? Go back and rest. It was the right decision for you not to participate in the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition. We should be hiding your abilities for now, and the moment you become a titled Douluo will be the moment you stun the entire continent. After bidding farewell to her teacher, Gu Yuna returned to her room in the Spirit Pagoda headquarters. After closing the door, a cold expression appeared on her face, and she slowly made her way over to her window before casting her gaze toward the distance. Her room just so happened to be directly facing the direction of Shrek City. Of course, Shrek City had already disappeared, and there weren't even any remnants of it left. In the aftermath of the bombing, the groundwater had gradually filled the massive crater, and Shrek City had now become a massive lake. All remnant traces of Shrek Academy had naturally also completely disappeared as a result. He'll come back sooner or later, she murmured to herself. Of course, he'll definitely come back. A gentler voice chimed in response. Let's watch the competition. We still don't know how he performed. Naya's voice was tinged with a hint of urgency. Gu Yue was silent for a moment before slowly making her way over to her Seoul television and turning it on. Bright City. Within a massive mansion on the outskirts of the city, there were a few people sitting in the guest hall. The broadcast of the first round of the final elimination stage of the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition had just concluded on the large screen Seoul television in front of them. The man sitting at the center of the sofa slowly rose to his feet. That man is still alive. Our Lord didn't kill him in the end. A beautiful woman with long green hair sighed. Our Lord seems to have been severely impacted by human emotions. That little bastard should have been killed long ago. Why is our Lord being so indecisive? A burly man grumbled in a perplexed manner. Shut up. The man sitting at the center snapped, and the room instantly fell silent. The man raised his head, and the golden highlight at the center of his head of long hair slowly trailed downward as he said in a cold voice, Find him. Chapter 1049. The entire Federation had been enamored with the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition lately, and now that the true finals had commenced, the Federation was making an active effort to promote the event, essentially transforming it into a grand festival. The Blood God Legion was no exception to this. Following the first round of elimination matches, 2 of the spots in the top 8 now belonged to the Blood God Legion. Tang Wuolin was naturally one of them, and the other one was the Blood God Legion Melee Guard Corps Commander. Chen strode slowly into the resting area and arrived at the cafe before ordering a cup of black coffee. At this time of day, the cafe was already packed to the rafters. The Blood God Legion was supplied with the best of everything, and the coffee here was no exception. He looked around to find that all of the tables were completely filled, with the exception of a single table in the corner, where only one person was sitting. He was looking out the window with a faint smile on his face, seemingly in deep thought about something. Even his side profile was very attention-grabbing as his face was very handsome, and his skin was like flawless warm jade. With Chen's exemplary eyesight, he was naturally able to clearly see every detail about this person. His eyelashes were very long, even longer than most of the women that he'd seen before, and his eyes were very large and bright. The warm smile on his handsome face made him appear very charismatic and energetic. However, what had truly attracted Chen's attention were the epaulets on his shoulders. He was a major general. How could there be such a young major general? Was it him? Chen had already heard of him before, and during recent times, his name was one that had been made known to the entire Legion. Over half of the tables around him were filled with female military officials who were at least at the lieutenant colonel rank. As for those below the lieutenant colonel rank, they most likely didn't have the right to sit so close to him. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly as he strode toward that table. Ever since he had drunk some coffee here with Long Yakshu, Tang Wuolin discovered that he really liked this bitter yet aromatic beverage. He enjoyed its rich fragrance, and sipping a cup of warm coffee while looking out at the world of snow and ice outside had become an enjoyable activity for him of late. Yue Zhengyu had cautioned him from very early on that it would not be wise to pile too much pressure on himself, and that it was important to have a cultivate life balance. He felt like he had maintained this balance quite well during recent times, and he had also been maintaining a positive mental state. Gu Yuna was his greatest psychological pillar. Whenever he was feeling tired, all he had to do was think of her, and all of his exhaustion would instantly be wiped away. In particular, when he was sipping a cup of warm coffee, he felt as if he could recall her image more clearly, and the coffee also gave him a warm feeling inside. Tang Wuolin really enjoyed this feeling, yet as he was enjoying himself, he also discovered that there were more and more people in the cafe. However, everyone seemed to have a tacit understanding with one another, and they would always leave the table in the corner right beside the window to him. Can I sit here, superior? An unfamiliar voice sounded. Tang Wuolin raised his head to discover a tall military official who appeared to be in his 30s standing in front of him. The epaulets on his shoulders indicated that he was a senior colonel. He wasn't particularly handsome, and his eyes were a little long and narrow, but his hard-chiseled facial features still stood out quite prominently. Of course. Tang Wuolin made an inviting hand gesture. Chen took a seat and reflexively glanced at Tang Wuolin's cup to find that he was also drinking black coffee. It appeared that they shared common tastes when it came to coffee. Tang Wuolin was still looking out the window, and the commotion within the cafe hadn't affected his good mood in the slightest as all of it was naturally filtered out by him. Superior. The voice rang out from across the table again. Tang Wuolin turned to look at Chen. Can I help you with something? Chen's black coffee arrived, and he held the cup with both hands as he said, I'm number 79. I look forward to facing you in the competition. Tang Wuolin raised an eyebrow. You mean the Star Battle.net Inter-Federation competition? Yes. Good luck. Tang Wuolin nodded and finished his coffee before offering a smile to Chen, then standing up and departing as all of the female military officials in the cafe looked on with longing in their eyes. Chen faltered slightly in the aftermath of that exchange. He had approached Tang Wuolin more so out of curiosity than anything else. However, he didn't manage to learn or sense anything about him during their exchange. There weren't even any soul power fluctuations emanating from his body, and no matter how Chen looked at him, he seemed like an ordinary person. However, his instincts told him that this remarkably young major general was very dangerous. Would they be pitted against one another in the next round? Chen reflexively clenched his fists tightly. Tang Wuolin didn't have much of an impression of Chen. His attention was highly focused right now since he drank a cup of coffee, not just for relaxation purposes, but to adjust his mental state. It was undoubtedly the case that the upcoming Mega battles were going to be a sterner test for him compared to the Soul Master battles, and soon, he was going to have to compete in the top 16 round of the Mega battle discipline. He entered the Star cabin and logged onto the Battle.net. His number had changed from 33 to 66, and there was a server to guide him to the competition venue on this occasion as well. Following the final round of the round robin stage, he was given the nickname of Spear King, and it was also in the final round of the round robin stage that Ling Wei suffered a close defeat, so she progressed as second in her group. As it turned out, Ling Wei was indeed the most exceptional Mecha pilot in the entire Legion. They were the only two who had progressed to this stage. They had progressed from the same competition region, so the rules stipulated they weren't going to be matched up against one another in this first elimination round, and he wondered if Ling Wei would be able to make it past this round. Compared to him, Ling Wei's Mecha piloting skills were definitely superior, but her martial soul was slightly lackluster. He chose a melee combat mecha and a spear as usual. Tang Wuolin looked at the spear in his mecha's hand, and he couldn't help but heave an internal sigh. It appeared that he was destined to just be a melee combat warrior for life. He had originally planned to master a long-range attacking mecha, but ever since he learned Fury of the Masses, he no longer had any interest in long-range attacking mechas. He had basically mastered Fury of the Masses now, and he was wondering when old Tang would be willing to teach him the next spear technique. Just the thought of this filled him with anticipation. Tang Wulian strode into the competition venue in his mecha, and on the other side, his opponent was also being led into the venue. This was a long-range attacking mecha. Tang Wulian immediately determined this after seeing the size of his opponent's mecha. It was holding a generic soul cannon that could unleash 10 blasts in a row before requiring a short period of cooldown time. This thing was basically a more powerful version of a soul laser cannon, and it was a long-range weapon that could only be chosen after one reached the final stages of the competition. This was because in the previous rounds, melee combat mechas had held an overall advantage over their long-range attacking counterparts. The soul power of soul masters combined with the defensive abilities of mechas made it very difficult for ordinary generic mecha weapons to pose a threat to them. So the BattleNet had to make some adjustments to even up the playing field. Both parties entered the competition venue, and the waves of raucous cheers immediately rang out in the spectator stands. The commentators also commenced their commentary. Number 66 is the nickname of Spear King, and he is renowned as the most proficient spear wielder in this edition of the competition. Number 231 is the nickname of Cannon Fort. His long-range attacks are extremely accurate, and he possesses soul skills that can enhance those long-range attacks. This will be a clash between a melee combat mecha and a long-range attacking mecha, so this battle will be decided by whether Cannon Fort can destroy Spear King's mecha before Spear King can get close to him. Alright, that's enough talking from me. Let's all sit back and enjoy what is surely going to be a spectacular match. There were no referees for this match, and the electronic voice immediately began its countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, begin. Boom. As soon as the starting command was given, a resounding boom rang out, and a soul cannon blast was sent hurtling toward Tang Wulian's mecha. Chapter 1050. Meanwhile, Tang Wulian's mecha had only just raised its leg, and the soul cannon blast was already quite close. However, as opposed to being aimed at Tang Wulian's mecha, the cannon blast was aimed at the ground just in front of him. So if he were to step forward, he'd be running straight into it. The best way to counter this would be to withdraw his leg and pause for a moment. This was clearly a tactic from his opponent to try and control his rhythm. Tang Wulian's heart stirred as he came to this realization. His opponent was using their long-range attacks to control the rhythm of the battle and restrict his movements. Ling Wuyu had once told him that the most powerful long-range attacking mecha pilots could control everything on the battlefield, and that their opponents would be reduced to puppets on strings that were forced to obey their will. These types of mecha pilots were extremely fearsome, and the impossible could often be made possible by them. Even if they only had one type of simple long-range weapon at their disposal, they would still be able to unleash a bag of countless tricks. In the face of such an opponent, the first thing that he had to do was to ensure that he didn't fall into his opponent's rhythm. Even if he had to take a few attacks head-on, he had to foil his opponent's control. As such, Tang Wulian activated his mecha's propeller almost without any hesitation. At the same time, he injected his soul power into his spear to release a powerful spear projection, and he hurtled directly toward the cannon blast. Boom. The melee combat mecha instantly passed through the explosion and continued to accelerate as it charged toward the opposing mecha. However, right at this moment, the opposing mecha seemed to have suddenly begun to perform a dance on the other side of the competition platform. With each and every movement it performed, a cannon blast would be unleashed from the soul cannon in its hand. As soon as Tang Wulian passed through the first cannon blast, 9 more were already hurtling toward him. The trajectories of these cannon blasts were very strange. All of them were flying in curved trajectories, hurtling toward a path that Tang Wulian had to take if he wanted to close in on his opponent. Tang Wulian harumphed coldly and displayed his immense physical resistance and exemplary control. Even while his mecha was being accelerated by its propeller, he forcibly controlled it to change directions in midair, sending him flying forward diagonally instead of straight forward. However, right at this moment, the 9 cannon blasts that he already evaded suddenly crashed into one another. A violent boom erupted from the side, followed by a powerful shockwave. Tang Wulian instantly realized what his opponent was trying to do. They had clearly predicted that he would be able to evade the first attack, so they had unleashed these attacks as a follow-up. Even though all 9 cannon blasts were traveling on curved trajectories, they were converging toward a single point. The two mechas were situated several hundred meters away from one another, and these generic mechas had no high-end circuits that could enhance their aim, so his opponent's accuracy in long-range attacks was quite extraordinary. As expected of the top 16, those who had made it to this point were truly a level above the rest. These thoughts ran through Tang Wulian's mind in a flash, and immediately thereafter, shockwaves erupted from beside his mecha. The powerful force behind these shockwaves instantly diverted his mecha off its original course, and he had just forcibly made the mecha change directions while traveling at high speed, placing intense overall strain on the mecha that was making it screech and tremor violently. These mechas were very heavy, so they could easily harm themselves while performing some awkward maneuvers. Tang Wulian was slightly alarmed by this, but he remained completely unflustered. He slammed the spear in his mecha's right hand into the ground to arrest its sideways momentum, and the mecha performed a roll in midair. At the same time, he turned off its propeller, and it landed on the ground in a stable manner. However, he still had to praise his opponent. Even though he'd already made a great effort not to fall under his opponent's control, he was still controlled in the end. Right at this moment, Tang Wulian was suddenly struck by the sense of a looming threat, and he discovered that there was a massive cannon blast hurtling toward him. This one was completely different from the cannon blasts unleashed by the generic soul cannon, and it was like a miniature sun that was approaching him at an alarming speed. This attack had clearly been unleashed before his mecha had been diverted sideways from the shockwaves of the previous explosion. He had completely fallen into his opponent's rhythm, and this was something that he really didn't want to see. The cannon blast had a diameter of over a meter, and it was shimmering with dazzling light, but at its core, there was a ball of flashing black light. It was quite apparent that this attack was definitely not one that Tang Wulian wanted to take head on. However, it was already too late for him to evade. Even if he were to use his soul skills, there was no way for him to evade the attack in such a short time. His spear was still rammed into the ground, so he couldn't even defend himself with his weapon. In this critical situation, Tang Wulian did something that no one expected. He drew his spear out of the ground, then sent his own mecha falling backward to evade the cannon blast. At the same time, his mecha's leg swept upward, and a rumbling boom concealed the lab dragon's roar that rang out immediately thereafter. A series of blue silver emperor vines erupted forth, winding themselves around the mecha's leg and striking the cannon blast. Boom. A resounding boom rang out, and the melee combat mecha was sent flying horizontally, opening up further distance between itself and its opponent, and it was looking rather disheveled. However, Tang Wulian controlled the mecha to slam its hands into the ground twice in quick succession, and only then was he able to make a stable landing. This was one of his 9 arts of the Golden Dragon. Golden Dragon whips its tail. Number 231 was rather disappointed that his attack hadn't ended this battle right there and then. That last cannon blast was one of his own soul skills by the name of Black Sun, and it possessed incredible offensive power. Who would have thought that Tang Wulian would withstand it in such an innovative manner? His mecha didn't seem to have sustained much damage in the process, either. During mecha battles, one only had to destroy the opponent's mecha to secure victory, so this wasn't a realistic battle scenario. Otherwise, even if the one's mecha were to be destroyed, they could still fight with their own powers. But if that were to be allowed, then all of these mecha battles would most likely just overlap with Soulmaster battles. A hint of astonishment surged through Tang Wulian's heart, and a cold expression appeared on his face. His opponent did indeed possess exemplary long-range attacking skills, and with their ability to control the flow of the match, it would not be easy for him to close down the distance between them in a generic mecha unless he was to reveal some of his Golden Dragon King abilities. However, doing so would immediately blow his cover, and that was not something that he wanted to do for now. Even so, he still had alternative methods. He quickly transferred his spear from his right hand to his left while waving his right hand through the air, and a streak of golden light flashed past as the Golden Dragon Spear appeared in the mecha's grasp. The Golden Dragon Spear that Tang Wulian used as a Soul Master was obviously different from the one currently being wielded by his mecha. The size of his Golden Dragon Spear could be changed at his behest, and he also had disguise techniques that could alter its appearance. At this moment, the Golden Dragon Spear in his mecha's hand was over 12 meters long, and it was shimmering with a deeper golden light than normal. At the same time, all of of the dragon patterns on its surface had been concealed. During his Soulmaster battles, his golden dragon spear was always of a scorching white color due to his soul power injections, so the two spears looked completely different at his point. It would be rude not to reciprocate an offering, so he was going to make his opponent face his long-range attack as well. Before his opponent had a chance to unleash another attack, Tang Wulian's Mecha abruptly stepped forward before hurling the golden dragon spear through the air. The golden dragon spear reached his opponent amid a flash of golden light virtually in the blink of an eye. He had held the golden dragon spear using the Tangsek's hidden weapon hand techniques, and he had placed more emphasis on speed, making his projective too fast for his opponent to evade. He had injected both his soul power and blood essence power into the spear, and also guided his Mecha's arm using his blue silver emperor vines, instilling this attack with as much power as possible. All of the spectators nearly saw a flash of golden light before the golden dragon spear reached Tang Wulian's opponent. What? Everyone's eyes widened as the golden dragon spear hurtled toward number 231. The soul cannon had just concluded its cooldown period, and number 231 was just about to unleash a second round of attacks when the golden dragon spear arrived. He immediately controlled his Mecha to fall to the side at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, his Mecha suddenly took on a crimson color, and a burst of energy resembling a massive energy barrier suddenly erupted from within the Mecha. The energy barrier fused with the Mecha to bolster its defenses, but he had still completely underestimated the power of the golden dragon spear. Thump. The golden dragon spear was indeed diverted slightly off course by the crimson energy, but its sharp front tip still pierced directly through the crimson light. Thankfully, it was diverted away from the Mecha's vital regions, but it still punctured through the Mecha's shoulder before flying into the distance. If this were a Soulmaster battle and someone's shoulder had been punctured by the golden dragon spear, then they'd at least be crippled. Fortunately for number 231, Mechas didn't have any life force energy for the spear to devour, but even so, a layer of cold sweat had already appeared all over his body. What a fast and powerful attack. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.